Hello and welcome to the Legislative Committee presentation of changes in the law, developmental services, and other California laws. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide a summary of the recently enacted Developmental Services Budget Trailer Bill SB 188, Chapter 49 Statutes 2022, which directly impact regional centers, state operational services, and the developmental disability service system. I'd like to now call on Doug Benet to start us off with the first topic, early start.
Thank you, Linda. So first thing we'll talk about is early start. Remember, early start is that birth to three program statewide, the prevention program for infants and toddlers that are showing some delays in development. So the first change is pretty significant. It's a change in eligibility. In the past, you used to have to be showing a child would have to be showing a 1/3 or 33% delay to become eligible. One of the ways to become eligible, and they've changed that to a 1/4 delay or 25% delay. So it's actually easier for a child to qualify for early start services. So what that would look like would be a 2-year-old, 24 months. The old way with the 33%, they'd have to test at 16 months or lower in a developmental area. But now with the new law, they only have to test 18 months or lower. So you're going to get a few more kiddos in the program, and we're already seeing that at the regional center. They had 5 developmental areas that are assessed, and what they decided to do was break the communication into their own categories. So expressive and receptive communication used to go together. Now they're their own category. So expressive communication is how a baby's communicating, whether it's verbal or with hand gestures, signs, pointing, things like that. And then receptive is how are they taking in information. So instead of 5 developmental areas, there's now 6. And then the last one is any risks that's associated with fetal alcohol syndrome could get a child eligible for early start. Prior to that, fetal alcohol syndrome alone wouldn't have a child qualify for early start. Next, we'll talk about some changes in the Part C to Part B transition. And Part C is early start. Part B is special education in the school. So that happens at age 3, and the process starts a little prior to age 3. And it can be really confusing for families because now the regional center and the school district are involved. Now you have people from the school district as part of the team. You have more people from the regional center as part of the team. There's different assessments, there's eligibilities, there's multiple meetings. So it sounds like DDS is going to meet with a lot of the families and ask questions and gather some feedback to come up with some new steps and some new training for families that will be available on our and DDS's website. We have an education specialist now. We've had one, but now the main role of that education specialist will be to coordinate the transition from our early start program to the school districts. The school districts or local education agencies, they call them LEAs, they'll also have somebody that will kind of be the counterpart of the education specialist at the regional center. They'll work together to smoothen that transition. And then the Department of Developmental Services and the California Department of Education are agreeing to create an interagency agreement to make those resources, the trainings readily available to families to really help that transition process be a little bit more smooth. Also, family resource networks, they're going to hand out information about transition. A lot of our families call on the Family Resource Network for other resources as they go through early start, providing different information on what happens after age 3 and what programs are there for age 3. Let's see, by October 1 of 2024, there's going to be new regulations for this that include a process for Part C programs to incorporate family feedback to improve family satisfaction. So we'll be asking families about their experience in early start and the transition. And then the department's going to survey all the regional centers for information for coordinating, for Designated point of contact responsible for coordinating and completing with other agencies, persons, the transition of a child and a family from Part C to B. Again, just trying to improve that process of transition when a child and family go from, services in the home under Early Start to services out of the home by the school district. In Early Start, they have what's called an IFSP, an individual family service plan, and that's where it outlines all the needs and the services that will be held. Remote IFSPs can still take place through June 30th of 2023. They will start meeting with the families typically prior. They would meet twice a year for an IFSP, but it looks like they'll start meeting quarterly, so 4 times a year instead of 2. Talks about the referral that we make to Family Resource Network during the meetings. The service coordinator always explains and hands a brochure about Family Resource Network out, kind of explains what supports they have. So if the family consents to it, we'll make that referral on the family's behalf. And then DDS is going to issue guidance to us on how the quarterly IFSP reviews and obtaining consent from families for referral to a local family resource center at each planning meeting. So over age 3, IPPs, individual program plans, they can still be held remotely if the family requests through June 30th. A little language change, we would always ask, as a service coordinator, you'd always ask the family, would you like this document to be provided in your native language? But now it's the appropriate term is your preferred language. And then also in the IPP, what we do in the IPP is you talk about what is needed for this consumer. They're asking that the service coordinators all consider barriers to service access during those meetings. We'll talk real quick about caseload ratios and funding. The regional centers receive money this year. We are in a big push to lower caseload ratios. So we're very high right now, 1 to 90, 1 to 100. And when they're that high, the service to the individuals maybe isn't as good as when the ratios are lower. So we're trying to get down to 62, 1 to 62, 1 to 67. So all the regional centers have received funding and are in a big hiring, I don't know what we say, big hiring time right now at the regional centers. The caseload ratios for 0 to 5 are a little bit different. Caseload ratios for consumers age 0 to 5 and younger are going to 1 to 40. And so you'll start to see that we're making that transition and lowering those caseloads from 1 to 40. And that's because they have to have more contact with those families, no less than quarterly. So that's a big change. And then we have a special team that is made up of all families that are Spanish speaking, monolingual only. So Spanish speaking only, who are clients of ours, but aren't receiving any purchase of services or very, very little. And so we have a team of all Spanish speaking service coordinators and a program manager. And their job is to contact these families and try and help find out why they're not receiving services and educate them on how to advocate and learn about the services. They provide a lot of, every time they meet with the families, they provide training. And let's see, what am I missing? That's about it on that. And then I will kick it over to Karen Gregorius, who will talk about the older kiddos and the half-day billing.
Thank you, Doug. I'm excited to share that day program services are no longer required to bill the regional center in terms of half-day billing. That section was repealed on July 1st, 2022, deleting the half-day billing requirement for day services. There's other sections that were also amended to delete references to half-day billing and half-day services. That was a short and sweet one, but a very exciting one. And next, I'll turn that over to Emily to talk about tailored day services.
Okay. So tailored day services, so fewer days or hours in the program's approved day program, lookalike day program, supported employment program, or work activity program design. Flexibility in the duration, location, including by remote electronic communications, and intensity of services to meet the consumer's individualized needs. Prioritizing the development or support of competitive integrated employment, volunteer activities, or pursuit post-secondary education, establishing and supporting internship program opportunities, maximizing consumer direction of the service, and increasing the consumer ability to lead an integrated and inclusive life. And I think Dina and Robert are up. Or, oh, okay, one more, sorry. So slide 2, the TDS may not be delivered on the same day as any other regional center vendor day program, lookalike day program, supported employment day program, or work activity program, unless all of the following apply. Number 1, the consumer has a plan identified in their individual program plan for transitioning from a work activity program to a competitive integrated employment, paid internship, or post-secondary education. Number 2, the transition plan is developed through a person-centered planning process that reflects and maximizes individual preferences and goals. And number 3, the duration of the delivery of TDS on the same day or days as a work activity program or supported employment services is no longer than 6 months. The total monthly hours of TDS may not exceed the number of days in the month TDS are authorized, multiplied by 4. And I think now we go on to Dina and Robert.
Roberto, did you want to do this one?
Yes. Vouchered community-based training services now allows for paid internship program in the vouchered community-based training services may be utilized. Also, this section was amended to state that the rate for vouchered community-based training services is the most recent rate posted on the department's website. What regional services should do: review the language changes and the update policies published and other materials as needed to reflect these changes. Current reimbursement rates by regional center are located on the department. Centers should inform their vouched community-based training service providers about these changes and work with them to adjust rates as needed.
Great, Robert, thank you. I think we're going to go to Karen.
On over the tone.
Thank you, Robert.
Say
Um,
on over the
wanted to talk about alternative non-residential services. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, on August 31st, 2020, providers of non-residential services were authorized to provide alternative services to meet the needs of consumers. When providing services, the providers needed to be creative, resourceful, and make modifications as needed to how existing services were delivered. Any alternative services that were used needed to be responsive to the consumer's current needs and mindful of the importance of safety during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also provided in compliance with state and local health orders and licensing requirements. The authorization for alternative services is ending on December 31st, 2022. The department will issue guidance to regional centers regarding the next steps and options for alternative non-residential services prior to December 1st, 2022. And next, I'll turn it over to Tony, who will talk about remote service supports.
All right, now can you hear me? I knew somebody would do that. I was just wondering which one of you was going to do that. So remote services and supports pilot project. So this might be unfamiliar with some folks. The department is going to work with the community stakeholders to develop pilot projects to test the feasibility of remote consumer services using different kinds of technology for people and living in their own home or supported living or different living settings, and how you might be able to use technology. It's being used in different parts of the state, and in California, they're going to begin to pilot some different ways of using technology to support people living in different settings. So that's exciting. It's intended to help consumers lead independent lives, more independent lives, increase their access to bilingual services. So there'll be a look at the cultural competence when we're looking at the different types of uses of technology. Also, is there a way to reduce the need for one-on-one support services from a person? Maybe there are some ways that you can do part of your day by the use of technology. You can do things independently. So we'll be looking at that as well. And so providers will be selected for the pilot program early in the year, and it'll remain in effect until January 1, 2030. So pilot will have a long life there. So next is the coordinated family support services. And this is another new and exciting program. This pilot program will focus on improving equitable access to services and supports and reducing ethnic and racial disparities in the purchase of services. So there'll be an outreach to different groups, ethnicities, and looking at how people may want to continue receiving services in their family home as adults, but still maintain some autonomy and agency of their own self. And so what can you do? And this pilot program will focus on in this area. Services provided by the pilot program must be flexible and are going to be tailored to the needs of that individual person, so that they can live at home with their family for as long as they want to and the family wants to, and have that as their living option. And there'll be an outreach to a very diverse group of stakeholders. I think we can go on to the next slide. I think there's another one on here. Oh, no, there wasn't. One other point I want to make about the last one is that there is a special focus also on aging caregivers. So those who are aging and living at home together with maybe the son or daughter is later in life and a senior themselves and then living at home with their family. So there'll be also a focus on supporting them as well. Okay, the next one is I've got the work activity program, the 3-year project program, and we'll go to Robert on that one.
Did you say Robert?
Yes, Roberto.
Work activity,
Slide 18.
work activity program. 3-year pilot program. A 3-year pilot program that focuses on competitive post-secondary education and career readiness for individuals with developmental disabilities exiting work activity program or secondary education in order to explore inclusive options including not limited to paid internship, competitive integrated employment and college to career programs by developed in consultation with stakeholders, including SCDD providers, person-centered and time-limited career pathways services. Consider evidence-based or promising practices for reducing or eliminating barriers to competitive integrated employment. Requires service providers participating in the pilot program. Oh, I'm not done. Oh,
I don't know if they. I don't
Yes.
There
think
we
they-
go. There we go.
Okay.
You're
Can you hear
handing it
us?
over to me, Robert?
what was that?
Okay, Robert.
Thank you, sir. The next one here says unemployment insurance claim data. Now, why would that be interesting? This allows DDS to get consumer unemployment insurance claims data for the purpose of monitoring program operations and evaluate employment outcomes for the employment first policy. So this is actually very important. It gives us an opportunity to access outcomes data on people getting jobs, people with disabilities getting jobs, and the state has a employment first policy. And so how do we know if we're doing a good job or not? And this will give us the access that we need to see how well we're doing. So that's what that one is about. The next one is our family cost participation program, and I'm going to hand that off to Linda. Linda.
Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Tony. Next, I'll be discussing Family Cost Participation Program and Annual Family Program Fee Suspension, TBL Sections 76 and 77 under the Section 4783, for those that are interested. This was amended to state that beginning July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023, that inclusive regional centers shall suspend existing and new assessment and reassessments of the cost participation under the Family Cost Participation Program. The suspensions shall no longer occur on or after July 1st of 2023, where in Section 4785 was amended to state that beginning July 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2023, inclusive, the regional centers shall suspend existing and new assessment, reassessments, and collections of the annual family program fee. The suspension shall no longer occur on or after July 1st of 2023. For Section 4785.1 was added, requiring on or before January 10th, 2023, the department to submit to the legislator as part of the annual budget process. This is a plan to revise the Family Cost Participation Program and the annual family program fee. The plan must be developed with the input from the stakeholders. The plan must consider changes that include, but are not limited to, those that promote administrative efficiency and program compliance. Implementations from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2023. Regional centers must suspend existing and new assessments and reassessments under the Family Cost Participation Program and annual family program fee, as well as collections. The department will work with stakeholders to develop a plan to revise these programs. Next up is Dina Hernandez with self-determination. Dina?
Hello. So yes, this is the self-determination program, financial management costs and SCDD report to the legislator. This program, this is just an update on some changes that will be occurring based on some barriers that people have encountered while being in the self-determination program. So the regional center must pay the full costs of the participant's financial management service or FMS provider. It was amended that deleting the requirement of the financial management service to be paid by the participant out of the participant's individual budget. So this will hopefully allow people to work with more equitable budgets. And also the regional center must pay the full cost of the participant's financial management service provider. And additionally, the section was amended to change the date to June 30th, 2023. With the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, SCDD, must issue a report to the legislator on the status of the self-determination program across the state and provide recommendations to enhance the effectiveness of the program. I'd now like to ask my pal Katrina from the Self-Advocacy Council 6 to help me with the next two slides on the appeal process, which is very important for people to be aware, and this appeal process information will make this process more equitable and fair to those that have to go through such a process. So Katrina, do you want me to start or what would you like?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, so I'll do the first one. So there were major changes to the appeal process for resolving conflicts between the regional centers or state operated facility or recipients of or applicants for service. So the following is a list of these major changes. So a 90-day resolution timeframe unless otherwise determined by the claimant. Do you want to do the next one, Katrina?
Yeah. No, notices. Thank you. Posted action NOAS position statements, notice about claimant's rights and other written statements such as the documentation, mental consent, or defined or standardized, thank you, as to timing and substance, thank you.
Great, no problem, teamwork. Okay, the next one is required documentation that must be shared in advance of a mediation or a hearing. Want to do the next one?
Yes, information provided in the performance language.
Okay. And we talked about that earlier about it being the new term preferred language of folks so that they get the information in a way they understand. So there'll be training for the hearing officers.
Okay. Hearing must be conducted accordingly to principles of engagement. How do you say this?
Neutrality.
Neutrality to bring out the relevant facts from each party.
So the final hearing decisions can be delegated. The Department of General Services Office of Administrative Hearings, are also known as OAH, unless the director of the department wishes to approve any of them.
Changes were made to the individual programs, plan, process, and
Template.
template to conform to those changes.
So data collection and transparency were also expanded in this process. And we have a second slide. So that is effective October 1st, 2022, section 4705.5 was added, stating that unless the claimant is themselves an attorney licensed to practice law in California, or unless the claimant will have an attorney licensed to practice law in California in attendance, a regional center attorney or department attorney shall not attend an informal meeting, mediation, or hearing. And this was something that came up across the state of California regarding attorneys at such appeal process. People felt very overwhelmed. The next one, Katrina.
Okay, the claimant must identify the regional center in the hearing office at least five days prior to
Mediation.
mediation and 15 days prior to a fair hearing if the claimant will have any attorney attending.
Also, the hearing officer may notify the parties in advance of a hearing that the hearing officer is allowing the attendance of an attorney in the interest of justice. So that means that everybody is aware.
Okay.
That implementation is that word, Katrina.
Implementation development issue
Correspondence
to regional centers on September 20th, 2022 regarding attendees of attorneys in the approval process. Specific change made by SD 188 relatives to per-exist laws are shown her.
Okay, I think we are passing it back to Mr. Tony.
Great. There's a lot of words on this slide, but I'm just going to tell you that there's the state was going to look into a new quality assurance instrument. And the purpose for this slide is just to outline what that process looks like. There are rules, regulations on how these kinds of contracts are pursued and implemented. And so it just tells you, lays those out. So not very exciting, but the exciting piece is that there's a quality assurance instrument coming our way in the state, and the state will do its due diligence to pursue the best instrument for us. The next slide is on the rate model implementation. And we thought maybe Candace might be very interested in tell you about that.
Thank you, Tony. So the rate model implementation. So a couple of years ago, all service providers were asked to complete a survey about where we were financially and some of the costs, all of the costs associated with doing a business in California, providing this type of service to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So for those of the providers that their service code received a rate increase, some of them have not yet, have had an increase in their rates. So starting January 1st of 2023, we are supposed to see the largest rate increase. Now, the expectation is that most of the money be spent on direct support professionals, those of us that are spending 75% of our time providing services. We are also expected to be in compliance with the home and community-based services final rule, which goes into effect March 17th of 2023. In order for us to receive all of the funds, all of the increase. And there's also an expectation for us to be able to receive 90% of the funds are an increase in the rates, and then 10% are related to a quality incentive program, which is, we don't have an outline for that yet, but hopefully it will be laid out for us soon. And then the next slide. So there are going to be two payment components. And like I said before, 90% of the rate model, and then the quality incentive program is up to 10%. They're expecting July 1st of 2024, uniform rates within service categories. Now, there is adjustments to geographic costs, wages, travel, and real estate. So the costs in the Bay Area may be a little bit than the Fresno area. So the department is taking those things into consideration. We are also expected to keep documentation of the rate increases that we do have, or the salary increases that we do implement, and make sure that that information is available to the department and to the regional center to audit us to make sure that we are following the regulations. So with that, we have HCBS settings with Robert.
Home and community-based services settings requirements. DDS allowed to adopt regulations or administrative program directives to implement and comply with home and community-based settings requirements. Anticipated directives may include information regarding service providers who have not been assessed or admitted, documentation for remitted information on federal requirements for person-centered services planning and clarification of required documentation with an individual's service plan regarding any modifications to the federal requirements based on individuals' assessed needs. Additional clarification of intent or specific federal requirements to assure compliance, e.g. what access to food means. Updates to ongoing monitoring procedures.
Okay, you're handing it over to me?
Uh,
I think you are.
we're done. Yes, sir.
Well, I'll carry on with the next one then. We're talking about developmental services, workforce stabilization and training, and some things that we can do to help the workforce. I also noticed that we missed one slide. One of the slides talks about the tuition reimbursement for in the regional centers, and we'll be able to pay up to $10,000 a year for college tuition for any of our employees to get their college degree, bachelor's degree or master's degree, any of the degrees that would help people want to stay at the regional center longer. They commit to a year, and then each year they commit to, they also agree to stay working at the regional center for a year. So they can do it up to 3 years. And so they'll be able to access 3 years worth of tuition funding. And then in exchange, they would promise to be working at the regional center for 3 more years beyond graduation. So really excited about that opportunity. Details are still being worked out from the department, but they'll be handing it off to all of us soon. And then the other piece of that is that they'll also be able to, if they end up moving or needing to move to another part in the state and they still want to work in a regional center, they can move from one regional center to the next and carry on the program. So that's a few of the details that we know, and it's meant to, again, help the workforce. The next piece here is that the regional center shall provide up to $500 in training stipends to direct support professionals who complete a variety of training that will be identified by the department. Each training stipend must be paid no later than 3 months after they've finished the training. So part of the funds will be used to compensate the service provider as well for as a fee is necessary to manage this program. Training and development courses must begin no later than November 1st, 2022. It's actually they're on their way right now to developing this, so it will happen very soon. And DDS is continuing to work on the details. There are a lot of different things here that the department has to put forth some rules on, and working with stakeholders and regional centers and everybody. It's taking quite a while. So anyway, this particular one has gotten a lot of attention and has been working on it, and that will happen relatively soon here on that part. The next slide. On the next slide is I'm handing that off to Candace.
Hi, sorry, I was muted. So the second part to this is an internship program. So the idea here is we are going to be able to offer a 3-month internship to provide entry-level training and practical work experience for participants. Outline the wage and employment costs for the paid internship up to 30 hours per week to collectively cover the participant wages and the service provider costs, which is really nice because onboarding new people is a pretty expensive cost for providers. So it's really nice that they're taking that into consideration. The goal is to focus on populations that reflect the state's diverse population and who do not traditionally have a pathway towards jobs in the developmental services field. It's a goal is to establish an entry point to the continuum of developmental services, workforce development, including training. One of the nice things is that it is also creating opportunities for post-internship permanent placement with stipends. So a $500 stipend for staying in the job for 6 months, and then another $500 for a stipend for over 1 year of continuous employment within that field. Regional centers are expected to track and report to the department on a quarterly basis the number of participants that are hired and the number of participants who reach 6 months and 1 year of the continuous employment stipend. Internships must be available no later than June 1st of 2023. And currently the department is working on this with stakeholders. So we will hopefully have something to roll out by that time. And we are going to transition over to Tony for the safety net plan.
Okay, on the safety net plan, the Department of Developmental Services is to report to the legislature by January 10th, coming up in a few weeks. So they're supposed to report to the legislature, give them an update on the safety net plan. So the safety net plan has to evaluate the progress made on creating a safety net plan. The safety net plan is usually, we're focused on maybe before we had some services, some institutional care settings or more restrictive settings, and most of those have gone away. And so we need to make sure we have a safety net to care for people with very complex needs. And so that's what this plan sort of focuses on. So how well are we doing? They'll have to get back to the legislature and report on that. The alternatives to institutional services, how well those are doing and how well we're doing in the state building those up. Best practices for supporting individuals at risk of placement into more restrictive settings. So what are we doing, and how successful are we on preventing people from using more restrictive institutional kind of type settings? But how is that going? Expanding and refining existing services. So we've made some modifications to certain services that were out there. We beefed up some qualifications of some staff and increased training, and also created some new models in financing of some of the homes, as well as some of the customizing how we would pay for specific services in these very complex settings. So that's another piece that the state will have to report on, the number of adolescents and adults with complex needs that are being served, and how we're doing with them, and also how much restraints are being used and how are we decreasing the use of restraints on in particular adults and adolescents. And then the department's strategic planning process, including how the department identifies service gaps and how the department plans to address the future needs of the community, also gets addressed at each meeting with the legislature. So that will continue. It's coming up soon for them, for the department to report on how well we're doing in that area. And then they'll also maintain information in this area on their website. It's required in the statute. And so you can go there on the website and read more about how they're doing. We'll move on to the next one. And we have Candace again. Back to Candace.
It's like we're playing ping pong. So the next section is seclusion, restraint, and involuntary emergency medication reporting. So we are already reporting a lot of this information to the Office of Client Rights. So with this new amendment, it has that all regional center vendors that provide crisis or residential services or supported living services, long-term healthcare facilities, and acute psychiatric hospitals are to report to the department the consumer's regional center and vendoring regional center, if different, the agency designated pursuant to the section in the toilet bill. We have to document the number of incidents of seclusion and the duration of time spent per incident in seclusion, the number of incidents use of behavioral restraints and the duration of time spent per incident of restraint, and the number of times an involuntary emergency medication is used to control behavior. The monthly reports must include the name, street address, and telephone number of the facility. Like I said, this information is already being sent, so it's nice that it's now going to be across the board with all the department, regional center, and that sort of thing. And then moving on, we have Tony for IMDs.
Thank you. Moving on, we have some new reporting requirements on the IMDs. They're called IMDs, stands for Institutions for Mental Disease. There's some, they require some very complex behavioral needs, as we talked about before, but these are very unique settings. What's going to happen is the department will work with the regional centers, with the IMDs, the Department of Healthcare Services and Disability Rights California, to develop a process for reporting all the new required information, how they will do this reporting, and what the public process will look like as well. And then we'll issue correspondence to the regional centers, and then any of the other IMDs and affected other providers. So each IMD used to report on a regular basis. Now that they are now reporting the preceding year, admitted a consumer to report quarterly on February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st to DDS and the regional center for the regional center's claims rights advocacy services. So just adding to that, and then finally we'll report on the age and race and ethnicity of the consumers placed in the facility, how many admissions occurred, the reasons for admissions, and the length of stay. So this is again a very unusual setting, very intensive setting, and so these rules are in place because we want to make sure that we have proper oversight and a lot of eyes on the use of this type of a service. So those are the changes that were put in place there. The next one that we have, we'll move on to the AFDC, FC, Kidney Gap data reporting with Linda.
Thank you, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
So regarding the AFDC, FC, ARC, KIN Gap data reporting, which is the TBL section 83 on section 11464, this was amended, changing the frequency from a semi-annual to an annual basis, in which the State Department of Social Services and the developmental must provide data as specified in section 11464 in paragraph H2 to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. The State Department of Social Services and the department must provide public transparency regarding implementation of this section through the annual posting of the data specified in section 11464 H2 on the respective internet websites. Each department must also maintain a link to the other department's data on the respective internet websites. So with that, next I'd like to turn it over to Candace Bright. She's going to discuss the Canyon Springs community.
Thank you. So Cameron Springs Community Facility Acute Crisis Admissions. So this is an expectation of or regulation for what is to happen when a person who is in crisis is admitted to Canyon Springs. Canyon Springs is meant to be a short-term placement for stabilization. And what's nice about these regulations is it talks about the facility must have a complete initial transition plan within 60 days of admission. So it keeps everybody talking about how we can successfully transition the individual out and provide community services to be able to meet their needs. So the department clinical staff must make monthly monitoring visits to observe the implementation of the treatment plans. The department must conduct monthly calls with regional centers to update transition planning and identify available placement options. And the facility must conduct a transition review meeting 45 days prior to transitioning an individual from the facility. And what's the entire team will be aware of what the expectations are for this individual. There's also a lot more information about what type of information is supposed to be included when the consumer goes or the individual goes into community placement. So it's a cover letter with the description of the acute crisis situation. So as a service provider and, taking individuals from an acute locked setting, it's nice to know what got the individual there and, where the difficulty lied initially. And then it's a current psychological, psychiatric, or behavioral assessment, the development evaluation report, the most current IPP, the date the individual became eligible for regional center services, and any other pertinent information that would assist with completing a full assessment. And that is it. And last is Emily on Fairview.
Thank you. Fairview Development Center property use, TBL Section 1, Government Code Section 14670.31 was added authorizing use of Fairview Developmental Center properly for mixed use of development including mixed income housing. The development would include and prioritize affordable housing, including at least 200 units of permanent supportive housing and open space. Priority will be given to redevelopment concepts that include housing that is deed restricted to providing that housing for individuals with developmental disabilities.
So now we're going to be moving on to the Senate bills, right, Tony?
Right.
Yeah, right now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the bills with the operational impacts for 2022. And we're going to start off with Tony. And he's going to start with the minimum wage increase and also the new state holidays. Tony?
All right, thank you. So the starting January 1, 2023, coming right up, there'll be a new state minimum wage. It'll increase up to $15.50 for all employers. This does not supersede any higher minimum wage. So some areas have minimum wages that are actually higher than that. So this will begin in our system. We've already begun to get all of our directions from the state on how to process this for some of our providers who are paying less than that amount for their wages. It's part of their design. So they'll be getting those modifications. The next slide, the new state holidays. Just reporting that 3 new state holidays are slated to be added to the calendar for the next year. The Lunar New Year, which is usually late January, early to mid-February. Also read that the Lunar New Year actually starts a little bit before Christmas because that's when you start cleaning the house. There's a whole process. So I learned something every day. So, but that's the dates that they have, usually late January, early February. April 24th, Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, and June 19th as the Juneteenth holiday. These are not slated as paid holidays, but one of them can be counted for state employees against their annual 8 hours of personal holiday. So they will be able to get that. And then those are the 2. The next is AB 152. Okay, good. Candace.
Yes, so sick leave, it's the end of the year. So the COVID paid sick leave requirements were supposed to end in September, but they have since been extended through the end of 2022. It allows employers to request additional COVID tests from sick employees, and the AB 178, all employers with 26 or more employees are subject to the aforementioned COVID sick pay mandate. For small business and nonprofits with an annual gross revenue of less than $5 million, there were grants available of up to $25,000, but that application process has since closed. I'm sorry, I don't know who's next, or it might be me.
Emily. I have Emily.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. So Family Rights Act, AB 1041 WICS. The California Family Rights Act requires employers grant family leave in various care/medical circumstances. This expands the definition of family to include someone who is equivalent to family, though not blood kin. Termed a designated person, such a designation may be changed once per year. And that's it, I think. And I don't know
Thanks.
who's next.
It's me, Emily. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I
So
couldn't read it.
marijuana discrimination, AB 2188. So starting January 1st, 2024, an employer can't discriminate against or otherwise discipline an employee who uses marijuana while off the clock, including most pre-employment screenings. However, on-the-job impairment remains actionable. And those under federal mandates, transit, or those applying for federal funds are still subject to controlled substance laws. Next is Katrina.
Workers' protection during strikes. AB 2530 would. No currently laws protects the health care benefits of workers who are on strike. Some employees have used this as a strike breaking eccentric starting July 30th, 2023. This bill will create a status stability for health benefits to how you say this word?
Disincentivize.
Incentivize, thank you, the removal of those benefits. However, for this subsidy, thank you, to oh my gosh, actively come online, new benefits in the budget would have to be appealed for this purpose.
Thanks, Katrina. I think it's me. COVID outbreaks. I get the fun one. COVID outbreaks. AB 2693 Reyes. So this extends the Cal OSHA enforcement powers related to COVID to January 1st, 2024. So this also simplifies the workplace notification requirements, and it ends current requirements that a workplace must report at what they call an outbreak. And I'm going to pass it back to Tony.
All right, I get the paid family leave. SB 951, that's Maria Elena Durazo. And so California's wage replacement rates for the state disability insurance and the paid family leave currently are set at a temporarily set at 60 to 70% of wages is the replacement wage, which is an increase from before, which was 55% back in 2018. So this bill keeps the higher rate in effect until January 1st, 2025. It also creates a higher minimum nominal wage replacement floor. So, and starting January 1, 2024, all wages are subject to SDI worker contributions. So currently the contributions are capped. And so this is an increase there. Well, it actually is sustaining the increase that was set forth. The next one is Linda.
Thank you, Tony. Next, I'll be discussing the workers' comp claims, mental health parity, SB 1002 Portantino. This adds the licensed clinical social worker to the range of approved healthcare providers that are considered appropriate based on the individual need, of course, for treatments arising out of a workers' compensation claim file under the mental health parity. Now I'll ask Candace to talk about workers' rights. Candace?
Hello. So initially, when I saw this, I slightly freaked out as a residential provider. But spending a little bit more time learning about SB 1044, it made me feel a little bit better. So when you read it, it creates a new worker's right. So in cases where there's an emergency condition defined by the bill, like a natural disaster, fire, terrorism, or evacuation order not related to a pandemic, the worker is protected if they decide to leave their that their immediate health and safety would be jeopardized by staying on site. That is fundamentally not a protection against generic work hazards, but more aligned with cases where workers have been forced to stay on site and unsheltered during a tornado. However, there are various workers that are exempt from this protection, including those whose job duties include direct patient care. So residential care facility workers are explicitly exempted from this. So if you are a residential provider, and I would assume a day program, if you're providing services to individuals, you would not be able to leave. You would need to stay on site to support the individuals. And then last but not least, we have Tony to wrap it up.
Great, thank you. The last one here is called California Pay Data, and Senate Bill 1162 by Senator Monique Limon. It addresses some reporting requirements now. Large employers with 100 plus employees that have to file an employee demographic data report, the feds each year, and also here in California, also required to provide pay data, a report to the state. It's due by the end of March. New changes will mean that any large employer, regardless of if they are subject to the federal report fees or not, they have to file that pay data report to the state, and now it's due in May. So a little change there. Then if you're 100 plus employees or contractors, a little difference here. The business has to file a report too. So actually no difference there. And then the median, mean, and hourly rate of pay is a new addition to this report. For those of you who do this report, this is a change for you as well. And separately, employers will have to tell their employees, if asked, what the pay scale is for their current job. And then any new job postings as well. So must include the pay scale, regardless of the job postings is being done by a third party or whoever. So you must report the pay scale of all jobs. And that wraps up that one. I think I did add one more slide here for us. And we also wanted to give you a quick highlight on a few updates from our friends Disability Rights California. This is DRC, sponsored bills signed by the governor. Sponsored bills those are bills that Disability Rights California has written themselves and then has advocated for, and then these passed. So we're highlighting 4 real quickly. AB 63 by Mansheim. And this bill helps people keep choice and control over their lives. It makes it easier for people to get out of conservatorships and to reapply for conservatorships and challenged. Before this, it's very difficult to ever challenge a conservatorship. So put in place a little more protections. AB 2598 Weber, education, the Department of Education must develop a standard model of restorative justice practices to be used in school districts. And so this is just a focus on making sure that those who may be causing trouble in the schools or harm in the schools, that there's a focus also on what they need to heal and to address what their concerns are as well. So and restore them to be able to fully participate in school. So AB 1957 Wilson, regional centers and the Department of Developmental Services are required to track and report annually on the number of instances where a translation of an IPP to an uncommonly spoken language exceeds 60 days from the date of the request. So they'll want to see how fast we are in getting those documents, important documents translated. And so that sort of will be a benchmark. The law extends the regional centers and DDS's reporting obligations to also track and report on the number of instances where a translation of an IPP into a more commonly spoken language exceeds 45 days. But the law also requires regional centers and DDS to collect and annually report on purchase of service data related to social recreation activities as well. So that's a little additional piece. And then finally, the law enables the public to monitor the restoration of these critically important services. And so there'll be reporting and we'll be revealing and we'll have a transparency section for that as well. And then finally, the very last one I'm highlighting here is AB 1195 by Christina Garcia. And then this one improves the state hiring process for workers with disabilities through the LEAP program. And the law provides that a state agency may request a list of LEAP applicants, and so that they can get them all separated out and look at them as potential candidates. And those were the final bills that we had for our bill file. And of course, our web page as a committee contains many more bills that we followed during the year. But this year we thought it was important with all the changes to trailer bill language, and we would put them together in this year's presentation.
Thank you, Tony. This concludes our presentation. We once again thank you for watching Changes in the Law, Developmental Services, and Other California Laws.